Hi, good afternoon, everybody. How are you today?
Hey, good afternoon.
I'm Jennifer Ackerman. I'm the HR director here for DMA, for those of you who don't know me and those on video streaming or webcast. I'm here to present Mr. Ray from Financial Benefits.
Federal Benefits Advocates.
Federal Benefits Advocates. I'm a little nervous here on the screen. But what he's going to talk about today is the sequestration, and what's impacting us as civilian employees is the potential for furlough. I will tell you today at 1500 there's another furlough meeting that I'm going to be involved in, and the latest I've heard is from the 22 days. I believe it may go down to 14 days, so that's some good news. We can all hope that maybe there won't be any days, but in the event that there are some furlough days, that does mean that you're going to have reduced pay, unfortunately, and Mr. Ray is going to go through some techniques that maybe you can think of to mitigate some of the issues that we're going to face. So for folks that are not local or not watching, they can email Crystal Edwards and ask any questions. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Ray, and I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Very much. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Our session this afternoon is titled Sequestration: How the 2013 Budget Cuts May Impact You and Your Agency. And as Jennifer mentioned, my name is George Ray. I'm the president of a company called Federal Benefits Advocates that's located in Denver, Colorado. And we work with federal employees to provide benefit briefings. I've had the opportunity to be here the past 2 days to do both a full-day SIRS and a full-day FERS benefits briefing for those who attended. And I'm also pleased to work with Mr. Ned Kissinger of Kissinger Financial Services. He was working with employees from those two briefings on Tuesday and Wednesday to actually do a financial planning session today. So at this point, what we'd like to do is focus on this issue of sequestration, and particularly on furloughs, because we all have questions about what's going to happen. Now, you may have received a copy of the material that I'm presenting today, a handout that has all of the slides that I'll be showing you, and that'll be a great tool for you to follow along, and also a pretty good resource, we hope, as well, too. It does have the information in there in a kind of question and answer format, and it does go through, I think, pretty thoroughly a lot of the questions that most folks will have. So let's start with this agenda that we're going to be looking at, and essentially, as I said, let's answer this in a kind of a question and answer format. So the first question everyone's asking is, what is sequestration and why is it important? But we'll also want to talk about how it impacts your agency as well, because you can imagine there's a lot of preparation that's necessary for agencies to get ready for sequestration and possible furloughs as well. And then we'll look at the effect that it has on you and your benefits. We have, as I said, a lot of folks who are wondering what will happen to my benefits, to my financial needs and well-being while I'm on furlough. And then finally, let's look at what can you do. So I'll try to give you a few ideas as to what you can do personally to try to make it through what could be somewhat of a difficult time in the next few months. As Jennifer was mentioning, I did see the information too, also today in the news media, that mentioned that it looks like we're going to go from 22 days within the Defense Department in terms of furloughs down to maybe 14 days. So that's hopefully that's good news. I think that happened as a result of some appropriations that were made in the last week or so. So we'll see. Again, I think things are still a bit up in the air. Things are changing as we speak, and as anyone certainly in the military knows, a moving target is a little harder to hit. So we'll continue to do our best. Let's start with that very first question, which is, what is sequestration? And as you may see here, it's essentially it's across-the-board cuts in all the different types of budget accounts that are out there. Nothing selective, just very broad cuts. These were made, by the way, by legislation that was put together way back in 1985. And it was placed into that law thinking, I think, at some point that it would never be used. It was kind of the doomsday procedure, you might want to call it. It hadn't been used and actually was updated through several other acts later. In fact, the most recent act, as it mentions here, is the American Taxpayers Relief Act of 2012, just last year. And essentially what's happening, of course, is the these sequestration and cuts have come into effect or taken place. And what it was designed to do is to essentially sequester money from our federal agencies. In fact, if you look up the term sequestration in the dictionary, what you find is that usually if there's a dispute between two parties that have some property, what the courts will do is sequester that property. They'll take it away so that it can't be harmed or destroyed while they're trying to decide what's going on. In this case, the Congress and the President years ago put this law into effect that said if we can't come to some type of an agreement, what we're going to ask the Treasury to do is to pull some dollars off the table, to sequester the budget so that we won't be able to do anything with it until the dispute, so to speak, is settled between, again, the President and Congress. And so because that dispute wasn't settled, unfortunately, the sequestration automatically went into effect on March 1st. What it's designed to do, as you see here, is to cut the overall federal budget about equally split 50-50 between defense and domestic spending. For this year, we're looking at about $85 billion in total budget cuts, somewhere in that neighborhood, and about $46 billion for just defense alone. So you can imagine it has a tremendous effect on what you're trying to do in terms of accomplishing your mission. Now the question might be then, well, so why is sequestration important? Why do I need to know about it, aside from the fact that it may affect my pay? And because Congress, as I said, did not get together with the President to come up with some other choices, sequestration went into effect on March 1st of 2003 this year, after being delayed several other times. Now, the real reason that this is important is because agencies have to come up with a way to lessen their budgets and to work within the budget targets that they've been given. Now, payroll actually comprises a big portion of agency budgets. Obviously, there's infrastructure and other types of things too, but all of you really are the ones who are the most important in providing the services that your constituents or customers need. And so with such a large portion of a budget made up of payroll, it would seem only natural that we have to consider that when we're making those potential cuts. Now, not all agencies have said that will be necessary. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But for those agencies who have determined that it is going to be necessary to have budget cuts and to have furloughs, they've said that it could be somewhat costly to their workers because it could cut their pay as much as 20%. And again, not all agencies have decided this, but for those that have, again, it can be a costly thing for their workers. So if the case is that there is going to be furloughs, well, what can we do? So I thought we'd start by just simply talking about what is a furlough, something you probably already know. But a furlough essentially places you into a temporary non-duty and non-pay status. So the good news is that it is temporary. If I make a comparison to some of the folks out in the private sector, many folks there tend to lose their jobs, not be furloughed, and end up looking for other work. So in some respects, it's fortunate that it is temporary. It is also a non-duty status, which means you're not able to perform your duties, and it is, because you're not performing your duties, it is a non-pay status as well. You're not being paid for being on a furlough. It is essentially leave without pay. You might want to know that there's two types of these furloughs. One is called a shutdown or emergency furlough, and those are put in place when the agency maybe doesn't receive its appropriations at all. The agency is required to be shut down, or maybe if the agency's mission for some reason is abandoned, they will not receive any funding. The furlough type that we're talking about here, actually, is an administrative furlough. And an administrative furlough, as my slide mentions here, is a planned event, an event that the agency should have sufficient time to be able to plan for. Although talk to some of the agency heads and they'll tell you it's been tough because we have to do all of the other things that are part of our mission, and this has somewhat distracted us from to having to put all this together, obviously. And it's certainly understandable that that is the case. Well, the question then might be, well, how will agencies be affected? And each agency does have to make its own decisions as to what it's going to do when it comes to sequestration and how it's going to meet its budget targets. OPM has asked agencies to put together a plan and to make that plan consistent and to make it fair or equitable for employees as much as they possibly can. But they still have to meet their mission. They still have constituents to service. And so this, no doubt, is difficult for many agencies to determine how to go about this. Now, I did make a few notes here. I'm going to refer to some notes that I made. There have been some agencies, as I mentioned a moment ago, that have said we're not going to have to furlough employees. For example, the Transportation Security Administration said no furloughs. OPM themselves has said we don't expect to see any furloughs for our employees. We'll meet our budget targets through hiring freezes and postponing other types of things. Many agencies have said they'll likely try to do that if possible. The Defense Department, of course, because it's picking up such a large portion of this through sequestration, as I said, $46 billion, half of the total sequestration or budget cuts for 2013, has a much more difficult task ahead of it and is more likely, as we've heard or seen, to have some types of budget cuts. So the question then becomes, if we do have to have furloughs, then how do we go about it? How can we determine which employees should be furloughed? What choices do we make, in other words? And notice I put a couple of these types of questions on my material here. So firstly, the first question that comes up is, will it be necessary to furlough employees? Do we have to? As I said a moment ago, some agencies have said we'll be able to accomplish our budget targets without having to furlough employees. If we do have to furlough employees, though, which employees do we furlough? Do we furlough all employees? Do we furlough only some employees? In fact, are there employees who are essential, who really can't be furloughed? Here again, I think the Defense Department said employees who are involved in health and safety issues, we expect them not to be furloughed because we need them. Other agencies may have other types of workers who they feel also are essential. Is that fair and equitable? It's difficult to say. Again, every agency will have to determine to its own extent whether that can be done. If we do furlough employees, another question would be, how long do we furlough them for? Do we furlough them all in one continuous way, by the way, or do we furlough them discontinuously, or kind of rolling furlough? We'll talk about that in just a moment as well. When does this begin? As we know, with some of the things that we've seen in the Department of Defense, the furloughs were expected to start earlier. I think furlough notices were expected to go out, and that's been delayed somewhat, and it's been changed again somewhat because of those appropriations that have come in place. And now we're looking at, I think, April 5th, I heard, was the last time that last day I heard for potential notices going out, and sometime in early May for the beginning of the actual furloughs. How best do we go about accomplishing this? I'll talk about that in just a moment as well. And then finally, we do have a large number of employees who are subject to collective bargaining. So will we have to deal with their unions, and how will we go about that? What are the rules, and how do we satisfy those? So many questions here that do need to be answered. So what must your agency do, I guess maybe would be the next question. The first thing, obviously, that we have to do is develop a plan. We have to figure out how we're going to go about meeting the budget targets that we've been given. And as I say, that won't be easy. OPM has said that this should be fair and equitable, that there should be some consistency in how we carry this out, and it will be a challenge for all of our employees as well as the agency heads who are putting the plan together. As we do this, of course, we'll want to identify the employees who are going to be subject to furlough and let them know, of course, what will happen to them as a result of the furlough. We're trying, of course, to disrupt their lives and their financial needs and the needs of the agency and its constituents to a minimum, as much as we possibly can. And so we'll come up with a plan. We'll have to, as we say, minimize the effects. And one of the things that OPM has suggested is that in order to minimize the effects, there are some procedures that have to be followed. And those procedures include notifying the employees in advance of the furlough. And as you can see, notifications are required depending upon how much furlough time an employee has to be put under. There's a 30-day notice for employees who will be furloughed for 22 days or less. And these are under the rules for leave without pay. For employees that would be furloughed for potentially more than 22 days at a time, or I should say not necessarily continuously, but sometime within the fiscal year, the rules for those types of notices fall under the RIF rules, the reduction in force rules, and are a little bit different, a different part of the regulations. Most agencies, I believe, have said that they're not likely to furlough employees for more than 22 days or 22 work days, I should say, or 30 calendar days in the remainder of the fiscal year. Most, I think, are trying to keep it, again, under the 22-day mark. So how can this be accomplished? Might be our next question. And generally, what we have to look at is the fact that the agency would typically want to avoid inconveniencing or penalizing maybe their employees in too much of a tough situation, in other words, or cause financial distress for their employees. So agencies do have discretion in how they go about doing this, but they're going to have to make some decisions as to what is the best way to do it. And so I've listed here a couple of different possibilities, different methods that agencies could go about in terms of having these furloughs or providing these furloughs for employees. Notice the first one mentions that an employee might be furloughed for 1 day per pay period, or maybe 2 days or multiple days per pay period, or even per week. In other words, we've chosen something that we feel is fair and equitable for all the employees. Every employee is going to be furloughed for 1 day per pay period, or 1 day per week, whatever is necessary to meet, again, our budget targets. This way actually disrupts the services of the agency at a it is much less likely to disrupt the services of the agency, and it's also less likely to have an effect, a great effect, on an employee as well in their financial needs, because it allows them to continue to get a paycheck from a biweekly paycheck as well, with as little effect, as I said, as possible. However, an agency could designate a number of furlough hours that an employee needs to take. They could say, here's a pool of hours that we're going to require you to take between now and some date, typically September 30th, let's say the end of the fiscal year, and you're required to take those hours during that time. Doing that is a little bit more flexible for the employee. However, it's also a little bit more challenging for an agency to manage. We have to make certain that if we do that, we have some type of an administrative mechanism to put in place to be able to record those furlough hours that are taken by the employees, and maybe even to manage them somewhat in advance, because if employees aren't there to help us staff our workforce, if too many employees take their time, as they desire, that doesn't help us in terms of being able, again, to help our customers. The third way might be to designate specific dates as furlough days. So I might designate, for example, I might designate a pool of days between now and September 30th. We're going to actually have let's say 25 furlough days, and these are the days. And you can take off any of the 14 days out of those 30 or whatever number we have. That could be possible, but again, a little bit more difficult to manage. Certainly flexible for employees, but again, not always the best choice, let's say. We could also designate specific dates where, I think as the Housing and Urban Development folks have said, we're actually going to furlough all employees on a particular day. We're actually going to shut down the agency on that day. And I think some agencies have chosen to do that. Again, could there be a disruption in services? That's certainly a possibility if something like that occurs. And lastly might be allowing employees to select their own days. And here again, some type of mechanism to manage and administrate that would have to be put in place. Here again, that's probably the most flexible. But where we could get into problems are employees who keep deferring their days and hope to take them at some point, or hope that maybe if they don't take them, that something will get changed and they won't have to take them at all. So that could be a challenge for agencies as well too, to have some type of mechanism to prevent that. Or if it gets to that, they may be forced to furlough an employee who was trying to avoid that by now simply saying, look, you've still got, 20 days. There's only 20 days left or 21 days left. You're going to have to take them all now. And that's certainly going to have more of an effect on the employee. Another thing, of course, that comes up with regards to all of these issues with furloughs is the fact that we don't want to have to place employees into a furlough status. What we prefer to do is offer them some other choices or opportunities. And I think that brings up a question with regard to VERAs and VSIPs. As you may know, the federal government and OPM authorizes these programs for agencies to use in order to incentivize the employee to leave federal service. And that way we can manage our workforce in an easier way without having to force people into maybe a discontinued service retirement or some other type of situation. So, of course, VERA's Voluntary Employment Early Retirement Authority and the VSIP's, the Voluntary Separation Incentive Payments programs, are these programs designed to encourage early retirement separation. OPM has said in their furlough guidance that if an agency has these programs in place, they can continue to use them. And for employees who might be subject to them or might have received an opportunity from these programs, they certainly might want to look at them in terms of in light of all of the things that are going on currently. So as I say, agencies can continue to offer these programs. Well, let me get a little bit more specific now, because we've been talking so far about the agency and all the things that the agency needs to do to accomplish this, but I think maybe why you're attending our briefing this afternoon is because you want to know about your own benefits and yourself. How is this going to affect you? And so let's talk about what you should know. And I'm going to start with just a few basics here. Firstly, the fact is that during a furlough, you're not separated from service. You are still employed. And as a result, you're not entitled to severance pay. You haven't been severed from your position. You're merely in a position of leave without pay. Also, you should know that you can't volunteer to perform your duties while on furlough as well. We assume that there would be some employees maybe who would want to keep doing their job in order not to get behind in their work, or to stay current, or because they may even have they may want to help their constituents or customers and feel badly by not being able to do that. But OPM has clearly said that that is not allowed. You cannot volunteer to do your work, or you should not be doing your work while you're on furlough. You may also be eligible for unemployment compensation as well. Now remember, you're not severed from employment, but you are not currently working. The challenge here is that the rules vary from state to state as to whether or not you can get unemployment compensation. Some states have rules that say you have to wait a week or some period of time before you can receive it. And so as a result, depending on how furloughs are carried out, if they are discontinuous furloughs where, for example, you're furloughed 1 day per week or per pay period, it may be very difficult to obtain unemployment insurance. Other folks have also said, I don't think it's right, maybe ethically or morally, because I am still employed, I just happen to be in a leave without pay status, and so as a result, maybe I shouldn't be applying for unemployment. I should leave that to the folks that are out there that really don't have jobs, so to speak. So that's something to think about certainly as well. OPM has also said that you may be able to secure a job outside of federal service, and that is possible as well, depending upon your agency and what they allow. So you'll need to look at the rules within your agency, and depending upon your responsibilities, your job responsibilities, you'll have to determine whether that is possible. Here again, it may not be possible with a discontinuous type of furlough where an employer would only have you working for them for, say, 1 day every 2 weeks or something like that. Just may not be possible. Right. So there are some things that have to be considered there. Another issue that comes up with respect to individuals is how your leave is affected during this period of time. So remember, you are in a leave without pay status, firstly. So that's what furlough time is. That's how it's treated, obviously, for purposes of leave and accrual benefits. One thing that you may know, and I think hopefully the folks from our sessions the last 2 days, the SERS and the FERS employee benefit sessions we did, will remember that leave without pay status is counted towards your leave status and also towards your retirement status if it's less than 6 months in a calendar year. So you can continue to accumulate that time even though you are in a leave without pay status, as long as there isn't more than 6 months in a calendar year. Also, you should know that you cannot substitute either paid leave or other forms of paid time off for furlough time. So if you're expected to be on a furlough, you couldn't say, for example, well, I have leave available, I like to just take that paid leave time. That also is not permitted. And you may, however, take leave without pay under the Family and Medical Leave Act if you have a situation that would permit that. That has been said that is okay for you to do. The one other thing I made a note on here that I wanted to mention also is simply the fact that if you're furloughed for part of a pay period, then your leave accrual shouldn't necessarily be affected during that pay period. But over a period of time, as those furlough days continue to add up, that accumulated non-pay status that you're in will have an effect, because once you've reached, for example, if you're on a regular, let's say 80-hour biweekly tour of duty, so to speak, then once you've reached 80 unpaid hours of leave, you'll lose the accrual for that period of time. And then it will start over again, and once you reach that period of time, you could lose that as well too. And this will go throughout the leave year. A leave year this year, I believe, is January 13th through of 2013 through January 11th of 2014. Another issue that comes up is holidays. So what about federal holidays? What happens if a holiday happens during a leave period? And so it is possible that your furlough time may include federal holidays. And the question here would be, so if my time does include a holiday, how is it handled? And notice here that I've put some information, again, as a reference for you. I hope you'll take this with you and keep it as a reference. If you do have a furlough time, furlough day, on the last work day before a paid holiday, but not on the day after. In other words, you have a day of furlough on either side of that paid holiday, but not on both sides. Then you will be paid for the holiday. So for example, if you were furloughed on July 3rd, let's say, July 3rd, and the holiday, of course, is July 4th, if you're expected to come back to work on July 5th, you will be paid for the holiday. On the other hand, notice that it mentions here that if the last work day before the holiday as well as the day after the holiday are both considered to be furlough days for you, then you do not receive payment for the holiday. So in my example that I just mentioned, if, for example, you had been furloughed on July 3rd and you were also furloughed through the 5th of July, expecting to return to work, I think in this case that's the Monday following on July 8th, then in that case your furlough day, your furlough time would include July 4th and you would not be paid for that furlough. Now, before you get too excited about that or upset, OPM has already instructed agencies that they're not supposed to do things that would affect your leave time. In other words, they're not supposed to put you in a furlough day just on a holiday, for example, in order to avoid paying you. And they should try to manage furlough time as best as possible to avoid taking away or penalizing employees in addition to the furlough time that they're expected to take. So it isn't proper for them, as it says here, to furlough you solely on a holiday, as it's mentioning. All right. One of the other big questions that I've seen recently from the federal employees that I've talked with, and as I may have mentioned, I also work with financial advisors as well. They ask a lot of these questions because their federal employee clients are asking these questions too, is how will your benefits be affected? So let's take a few moments to talk about benefits and how they'll be affected as a result of being placed into a furlough. And what we'll want to do is talk about, firstly, pension, both FERS and SERS, how will that be affected? The thrift savings plan and the contributions that I make to it. Social Security, certainly for those who are FERS or SERS offset employees who are subject to Social Security and pay into Social Security, will furloughs have an effect on me there? As well as life insurance, health insurance, disability, and even long-term care payments. And the good news, I think, for the most part that I can say is that in general, you'll find that there is not a large or very great effect on benefits. If there is an effect, for the most part, it's whether you'll be able to make the payments from your regular paycheck because of the furlough days. And once again, as we said, in many cases, agencies are doing discontinuous or rolling types of furlough days, which should help to minimize that. But I'll talk a little bit about that as well in just a moment. So let's start with the pension plan. The first thing you should know about both FERS and SERS, the pension plans, are that coverage will continue while you're on furlough at no additional cost to you while you're in non-pay status. Normally, we pay into those plans, both SERS and FERS, and as a result, we're expected to receive those benefits at some point in the future when we retire. There will be no, those plans in your retirement payments would not be in jeopardy as a result of the furloughs. Notice that if you're in a discontinuous type of furlough situation, what they're simply going to do is adjust your contributions in proportion to the basic pay when a non-pay status occurs during a portion of that pay period. If your pay period does not include any actual duty time, in other words, you're in a non-pay status for the entire period of time, your agency is expected to continue to make its share of those contributions, and you're not expected to owe any contributions as a result. The real questions I think that come up have a lot to do with creditable service and with the high 3 average pay. And as you probably know, those are the two key elements that are used to determine what you will ultimately receive. These plans, FERS and SERS, are defined benefit plans, and they have a formula that's used in them to determine what benefits you'll get at retirement. And the key elements of those formulas, as I say, are creditable civilian service and high 3 average pay. The good news with regards to creditable service, as we said a moment ago, when it comes to your service, furloughs should not affect that creditable service as long as you're in a leave without pay status for less than 6 months in a calendar year. And as I said, most folks are not expected to have that much furlough time, obviously. The last issue here that also has come up, I think most recently too, is the high 3 average pay. Will my high 3 average pay be affected? Because if I have a furlough, I'm being paid less. And as I know, OPM, when they calculate my pension ultimately, is looking for my high 3 average pay, 36 consecutive months of time in my career somewhere where I made the most money. Is it possible now, because of furloughs, and as George, you said earlier, maybe a 20% cut in pay, possibly, that my high 3 average pay would fall somewhere earlier on in my career, and maybe now it's not going to count. And the issue here is, and OPM has clarified this in some guidance that they've provided, and I'll tell you a little bit about how to get some of that additional information at the end here. They said that although the furlough does reduce your earnings, in effect, because you're not being paid as much during that pay period, it doesn't change the amount of basic pay that's used to calculate the high 3 average pay. So the answer is no, furloughs essentially don't have an effect on my high 3 average pay or creditable service, and ultimately on my pension either. Good news. Let's go to the next benefit, which is the thrift savings plan. A lot of questions about the thrift savings plan, and interestingly enough, I think there's been so many questions on the thrift savings plan that when I initially looked at some of the furlough guidance that's available through OPM, they were trying to answer a lot of those questions, those TSP questions. And since then, I've noticed that they've updated their guide and just kind of said, go to the tsp.gov website for a lot of those answers. So I think they've been trying to manage the amount of questions that they've been getting by sending folks to the right places. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as we close out as well. So you may continue to contribute to your TSP as long as you have compensation to defer during a pay period. So if I'm being paid, and if, for example, my furlough is a discontinuous type of furlough where I'm only being furloughed maybe 1 day per pay period, for example, there should be enough pay within my pay check to continue to make my TSP contributions. Now I'll show you in just a moment something that are referred to as the insufficient pay rules. And you'll realize that the TSP contributions actually fall rather far down the line, so to speak, in terms of what gets taken out of your pay. So it's likely that those will continue, but there is a possibility that they might not, depending again on how you're furloughed, how much time, things like that, as well as the amount probably of contributions that you're making. Notice that it mentions here, if you've chosen a percentage amount to have taken from your pay, deferred from your pay and placed into the TSP, that the actual dollar amount will be a little bit less, because again, if your earnings or pay are a little bit less during that period of time, they'll still take out the same percentage amount, just not as much dollars will go in. However, if you've chosen a dollar amount to come out of your TSP, they will attempt to take that dollar amount out of your pay and contribute it to the TSP, assuming that there's enough dollars there to actually do that. And as I said, the TSP contribution falls a little bit further down the line, so I'll show you that in just a moment. While on furlough, you can continue to make interfund transfers. This means that the money that is inside of your TSP, if you feel something has changed either in the economy, in the financial markets, or particularly in your financial situation, which it may have, you can move the money around in the TSP, maybe putting it into a more conservative place for you right now if you feel that that's important. Contribution allocation changes, though, these are the contribution changes that you make from your pay for the initial contributions that go into the TSP. Those are not allowed while you're in furlough status. Here again, that may not create a huge problem, because if employees are furloughed in a discontinuous way, if I can't change my contribution allocations today, I'll just do it when I come back to work, so to speak. Contribution allocation changes will also take effect when you return to pay status. So if you make those contribution allocations, they'll take effect at that time. Lastly, in-service withdrawals, both age-based and hardship withdrawals, can still be requested. So as you may know, a hardship withdrawal can be requested if you're in a hardship situation. It is possible that employees might find themselves in a case upside down in terms of cash flow and might wish to request a hardship distribution from their TSP in order to help out during this period of time. I would caution you about doing that, however, because if you take a hardship withdrawal, you're required to not be able to contribute to the TSP for 6 months after that withdrawal. So if you're taking that withdrawal, it's a serious decision that you're making, because once you do come back, you'll not be able to contribute, again, for up to 6 months. And that will put you behind in your expected planning for retirement. Age-based withdrawals, if you're familiar with them, are available for employees who are 59 and a half or older, and they can be taken one time only out of the TSP. It allows someone who is closer to retirement the flexibility to take that money and maybe move it to an IRA or some other type of an account and have more choices beyond simply what's inside of the TSP. Those folks that are in that situation can still do that. If you're 59 and a half or older and you'd like to take an age-based and service withdrawal and feel that it's important or necessary, you can still go ahead and do that as well. A couple of other things to mention about the TSP. You're not able to request a new loan while in a furlough period. Loans are secured against your account balance, and they're also paid by being able to deduct those loan payments from your pay. So if you're in a furlough period, you're not able to pay back that loan and not able to request a new one either. Again, the discontinuous furloughs that have been talking about are expected to minimize the impact of that as well too. If I'm back at work, I would be able to take a loan. You're allowed to miss loan payments for up to 1 year of non-pay status. Again, I don't think anyone will have an issue with being away expecting to be away for a year of non-pay status, but you can miss a loan. However, a loan payment. However, the loan interest continues to accrue, so the interest isn't forgiven. You will actually have to make those payments. And if your loan is in a non-pay type of status, a couple of things that you can do. If you want to keep the loan payments current, you can always pay the loan directly to the TSP folks. They said Form TSP 26 is the loan payment coupon that's used. Now, again, that might not be quite so easy if you're in a furlough status, and particularly some of those folks who are closer to living, paycheck to paycheck may have some difficulty of that. But for the most part, if you want to keep the loan up and keep it current, you can do that. If you don't keep the loan current, and remember, there are two types of loans. There's an individual type of loan, or general purpose type of loan, I should say. And there's also a residential loan. The general purpose loans are available from 1 to 5 years. You don't need any type of documentation to take that type of loan. Residential loans are available for up to 30 years for the purchase of a principal residence. So those loans are expected to be paid back within those periods of time. So if the furlough should cause your loan payments essentially to get behind, then to not be current, those payments may need to increase in order to pay the loan off on time within the standard time period. So that is a possibility. Also know, and this is kind of a big gotcha, I think, is the fact that if a loan default occurs, if you don't pay back the loan, for example, if you don't come back to work, then a taxable distribution occurs. In other words, the loan is considered to be a taxable distribution to you. You would pay tax on that entire amount. For example, if you'd taken out maybe a $30,000 loan and paid back $10,000 of it so far, the remaining amount, that $20,000 that is still owed, now becomes a taxable distribution to you. And if you're under age 59 and a half, you may pay a penalty, an early withdrawal penalty on that as well, a 10% penalty. So that can be rather expensive if you find yourself in a situation where you default on a loan from the TSP. Let's talk just briefly about Social Security. And as I mentioned, we'll do this simply because we have a lot of, obviously, FERS and some SERS offsets who do pay into Social Security and are subject to it, of course. While in furlough status, you continue to make Social Security payments from your biweekly check, and this is assuming that you have compensation during the period. And by the way, those FICA payments come out rather high in the order of stuff that comes out, so they're going to take those out early. Deductions are in proportion to your basic pay. So I've mentioned here, for some folks, you might want to adjust your W-4 forms that you submit for the withholding on your pay. It may not be necessary, however, to do that, but for some folks who are looking for a little bit of extra cash in their paycheck during a period of time like this, maybe adjusting that W-4 could allow that to happen. On the other hand, do be careful, because once you go to file your taxes, you may owe additional monies, and rather than getting that refund that you've been expecting, you might actually have to write a check. But in general, furlough time should not have a significant effect on future Social Security retirement payments or disability benefit payments from Social Security as well. We don't expect or see that happening. On to life insurance. First thing to know about life insurance: your Federal Employees Group life insurance coverage continues for up to 12 months while you're in a leave without pay status, and it does that at no cost to you. You can be away, not making those payments, but you'll still continue to be covered under the Federal Employees Group life insurance program. However, if your furlough is for only a part of a pay period, you'll still be required to make the premium payments that you would normally make, and those payments would be deducted from your pay. As it says here, you don't incur any debt for not being able to pay those premium payments during a period of time when your pay is not sufficient to make those premium payments. But if you are being paid, you're expected to make the payments. So if your pay is not sufficient to pay your portion of the premiums, then it's suggested that the leave without pay insufficient pay rules apply. And you'll see this terminology used on a couple of other types of benefits as well. If there's not enough money to pay for that benefit, then there's something called the insufficient pay rules that apply. And I'll show you that and talk more about that in just a moment as well, give you some information. When it comes to health insurance, your coverage continues. Of course, while you're on furlough, you can continue to file claims for yourself and your covered family members. And your agency will continue to pay its share of the premiums as well. As you know, the agencies do pay a big portion of your health insurance premiums. If your pay is not sufficient, of course, to take out your portion of the health insurance premiums, then again, those leave without pay insufficient pay rules apply, as I just mentioned a moment ago. And hold that thought, because I will talk a little bit about that. In fact, I'll talk about it next. So here's the insufficient pay rules, and this essentially says that when your gross pay isn't sufficient to permit all the deductions that you would normally have taken from your paycheck, that there is an order of precedence. And again, for those folks who were joining us for our SIRS and FIRS sessions the last 2 days, I talked about order of precedence and what this means. Essentially means someone is standing in line at the top and they get paid first, and the folks further down have to wait for their payment, essentially. So if you see here that I've placed on the slide a little bit of information about that order of precedence. The first thing that actually gets taken from your paycheck is your retirement deductions for SIRS or for FIRS. Next comes out Social Security, as well as some other taxes, federal income tax withholding and Medicare tax. Those kind of things those taxes tend to come right off the top, so to speak. Then you start to see basic health premiums, life insurance, later state and local income tax, debts that you may owe to the federal government, things like other types of debts that are court-ordered, alimony, child support, those kind of things will come out of your pay. Notice, by the way, that I ran out of slide to put all this information on, and it does go much further, but notice that TSP is not on there. It does come up further down the line. And so I assume that there are going to be some folks that will have questions. And so what I put together was here on the material that you have is just a little picture of the website where I obtained this information, and OPM's furlough guidance refers to this as well. It's the, hold on here, it's the CHOC, which is the Chief Human Capital Officers Council website. And this was a letter that was actually sent to human resources officers and payroll officers way back in July of 2008. So if you actually go to this area, which is called transmittals, and start to page down, it'll take you a while to get back to 2008 because they get a lot of stuff, believe me. So the best thing to do would be to use that web address that's at the bottom of the slide there. That'll take you right to that ID 1477. And if you go through there, you will see all of the things that they take out of your pay and what order they come out in. And they even do talk about some of the other issues, that how they have to kind of loop back around when, for example, they do get to the TSP contribution and it's ready to be taken out. That reduces the taxable pay. So we have to kind of recalculate some things. Again, it's a little bit complex, but if you'd like some more information on what those insufficient pay rules are, that would be probably the best resource to go to. What about vision and dental insurance? So if you've enrolled in the FEDVIP program, the Federal Employees Vision and Dental Program, you should know that coverage continues while you're on furlough. You can also continue to file claims as well too, and eligible claims get processed and paid. The real issue that comes up, and as I said, for the most part, many of these benefits do remain and remain in effect and aren't affected, I should say. Where the issues tend to come up is, can my pay can I pay the premiums from my pay? Let's put it that way. So notice here it says that if Benefeds, the folks that are the contractor for the vision and dental insurance, say that they cannot collect the premium from your pay, then they're going to collect 2 premiums during the next pay period. So be aware of that, because again, that's a little bit extra coming out of that pay, the next pay period. If the furlough continues so that those premiums cannot be collected for more than 2 pay periods, then they're going to mail a direct bill to you and expect you to make those premium payments. And so you'll need to pay those premiums directly to Benefeds on a timely basis in order to continue your coverage. Flexible spending accounts. Some employees do use flexible spending accounts. There's been a number of folks that we spoke to in the last couple of days who have been using them. Not everyone does, but they can be used obviously for health care expenses and for dependent care expenses. What they said is that your coverage, again, with those types of accounts does continue, and that any allotments that have been made from your pay will continue to be contributed to your account as long as, again, there's sufficient pay in your paycheck to be able to make those contributions. However, eligible health care expenses don't get reimbursed or won't be reimbursed from your health care FSA until you return into pay status, and when that happens, it's possible that those allotments would need to be recalculated throughout the remaining portion of the year in order for them to fall along the line of what you actually had requested initially. Eligible dependent care expenses can also be reimbursed can be reimbursed while in non-pay status, up to whatever the balance is in your dependent care account, as long as you're looking for work, or a spouse may be looking for work, or you have children attending school full-time, those types of things that are typically required of the dependent care accounts. Next would be disability. And when it comes to disability, generally federal employees have 3 areas to go for disability type of compensation. The first place to go is through the Federal Employees Compensation Act, or FECA, which is the workman's compensation. Now, workman's compensation is not going to be available during furlough time because it requires that you're injured performing your duties on the job. And actually, if you're in a furlough status, you're not on the job and shouldn't be performing your duties. So should you be injured, workman's compensation would not be a place to be able to go to get disability compensation. However, Social Security disability could be requested if you find yourself with an injury or disability while in furlough, although you may know that Social Security does have a rather strict definition of what they consider to be disability. They have a waiting period of 5 months to get benefits, and you'll have to have adequate credits of coverage to meet the disability requirements as well. The last place to go might be the pension. The pension from either CSRS or FERS does also offer a disability benefit, and that might be the place to go to request a benefit should you be injured while on furlough. You should probably know, if you're a FERS, that you do have to request Social Security disability first before you can obtain a FERS disability benefit. Lastly is long-term care, the last of the benefits that we want to talk about. So when it comes to long-term care, once again here, your coverage continues while you're on furlough. You're eligible to make claims, to file claims. Those claims will be processed, of course, and paid if they're eligible claims. The real issue here again is, can I continue to pay for the benefit? And so notice it mentions that if the coverage will terminate if the premiums aren't paid. They do give you a bit of leeway, we'll say, because if you miss premiums for, I believe, 3 consecutive periods, then they'll actually bill you. 2 consecutive periods, they'll just simply increase that premium in your next paycheck by as much as $50 until it gets caught up. But 3 periods missed, they're going to send the bill to you. You then have a 30-day grace period to pay that premium. Otherwise, you lose coverage retroactive back to the last time the premium was paid from your pay. All right, well, we talked about all of the different benefits, I think, and I hope I've given you some information to think about as we go into this period where these furloughs are possible. And lastly, I wanted to finish out from a little bit broader perspective of maybe what is it that you should do in order to make it through the furlough period. Again, we all recognize that it's a challenging period for all of us here. So I've got 4 suggestions here that I'm going to make, and I'll talk a little bit more about each one. And I'll make these from from more of a personal financial perspective. Firstly, as it says, review your current budget, look for ways to save money, consider additional employment, and use furlough time wisely. Let me talk just a little bit about each of those briefly. Firstly, know your current monthly cash flow. This can be difficult for some folks, especially folks I think at the higher income levels. We tend to let some of the money fall through the cracks. It's easy to go to the ATM machine and take $200 out, and all of a sudden a few Starbucks later and it's all gone, right? Folks at lower income levels do tend to have a budget, they tend to stick to it, and they tend to watch it a little bit more closely. So I might suggest that maybe some of us at the higher income levels might even be a little bit more challenged by something like this, knowing what our cash flow is. Look for unnecessary expenditures. Things like, well, I guess some folks, maybe my wife would say the cable is necessary. We have to have something to watch on TV. But maybe I can get rid of HBO or Showtime, something like that possibly. Restaurants, vacations, some of the things that I was expecting to do, maybe I need to hold off on those things right now, those unnecessary expenditures. I would also suggest that you get your entire family on board. Everyone needs to understand what's going on with mom or dad or both parents who may be on furlough and what's happening. Why are you home today and not working? Are you on vacation? And if we've eliminated the cartoon channel or something like that, why did that happen? So this is a great time actually to teach children about budgeting and about financial responsibility so that they can learn how to handle their own money when they're older. You may need to access an emergency fund. Most financial advisors will tell you to have several months worth of cash set aside in a money market fund or some type of an account that you can easily get to when something like this occurs, when we have a challenging financial situation. So this is the time, if you've saved that money in an emergency fund, to maybe access it now. If you haven't put money aside in an emergency fund, this might be a good time to start to do it. Again, it might be challenging because of losing some pay, but if you're able to do that, I think you'll see that it can be very beneficial to do it. Also, let's see here. I think I had a double slide there for some reason. So look for ways to save money. I mentioned consider refinancing. If you look at your home, for example, mortgage rates have come down. It is possible to refinance. Not everyone is in the position to be able to do that, but doing as little as a 1% lower interest rate can save about $200 a month on a mortgage that's about $250,000. So anything larger than that, obviously more money can be saved. But be aware of closing costs and other types of things if you are looking at that. Reduce credit card debt and try to keep credit card debt to a minimum. Most financial advisors will tell you to do that anyway. But particularly during a time like this, that can also cause us to not have as much cash to be able to do some of the basic things and have some of the basic necessities that we need. You might want to get an insurance quote, maybe to lower your premiums. Talk to your agent, let them know about what is happening with your current status and see if there are some ways that you could possibly get some savings. In many cases, we get our insurance, whether it's auto insurance, homeowners insurance. We don't even talk to anyone for years and things happen, and there often are ways if you talk to your agent for him or her to help you lower the premiums. And if not, you can always get a quote from a competing agent. See if they're looking for business and if they can give you a good deal. Of course, look at all the details of the policies to make sure that you're getting the right things that you need. And lastly, you may need to currently reduce your savings. Savings that are going towards college funding, certainly it's important, but maybe this is a time where we have to cut back a little bit. Contributions to IRAs, and even to your thrift savings plan if that's necessary right now. It may be important to do something like that, to take a little bit of a break in order, again, to be able to live more comfortably through this challenging time. I mentioned consider additional employment. Again, this isn't always possible depending on how you're furloughed or what your agency rules are. But if necessary, look for a part-time position. as I say, make sure that it's okay first before doing that. Consider developing a home-based business. A lot of folks have a hobby or some certain types of skills that they may be able to generate some additional cash. It says look at Craigslist, job boards, and other types of places where they might have positions that are looking for your types of skills, maybe short-term positions. And finally, this is the time to reach out to neighbors, community groups, and others for assistance as well too. Look to see if they might be in need of your skills and if they might need your help. Lastly, I'll say this, above all, use furlough time wisely. This doesn't have to be generally a negative thing. Think about all the time that you'd love to have and have just been too busy in your job to be able to do some of the things that you want to do. We can paint a room, we can work in the garden, do those things again that we don't normally have a chance to do. Getting closer to family and friends, calling those folks that we, again, are often too busy to talk to just because our jobs don't allow us to. It's possible to learn a new skill, a new hobby, take a class, volunteer at a charity or event. All these things are just general types of suggestions, and I know they're a little bit tough to take to say, well, you know, I'm going to have less pay, and I know you want me to smile and get through this, and I'll do my best, but it's tough, no doubt. The last thing, though, remain positive. As I say, many folks will be able to use this time and to use it wisely to help them and to get closer to family and do a lot of different things that they would like to do. So what do we do now? Just kind of in summary. We talked about sequestration and its importance. We looked at the challenges that your agency faces in terms of preparing a plan, the potential effects that it has on you and your benefits, and also I gave you a few suggestions here at the end for how to survive it, how to survive sequestration, that is. What if you have some additional questions? Let me point you to a couple places to go. I would say first place to go is to check with your agency. More than likely, there are other folks within your agency that have had similar types of situations, have had similar questions, and they'll likely be able to help you by answering those questions. That's the first place to go. Next place to go would probably be the individual benefit websites, particularly if you have questions about the TSP plan, for example, or FSA Feds or LTC Feds. You go to those places. Most of them, if you go to their sites, have put new information on their sites recently, specifically for their customers about what's happening with regards to sequestration and to furloughs. They've placed that information on there, as I said. The other place to go, and I won't say the last place, maybe the first place, would be OPM's website. They've actually placed a PDF there that I've used for some of the background material in my talk today called Guidance on Administrative Furloughs. And if you go to their site, click up at the top on the Policy tab, look down the left side under Pay and Leave, you'll find an area that says Furlough Guidance. And if you go to that page, there's a couple of tabs in there. One of them says Administrative Furloughs. And what you'll find there is a book that looks just like this. It's called Guidance for Administrative Furloughs. And they are updating this book. The first copy I got was several months ago, but I noticed just the other day that it's been updated. And I think the latest version is something like March 13th. So they are continually updating it with lots of questions and answers as employees and agencies are asking, how do I handle this? How do I handle that? So also good places to go as well. That's all the prepared remarks that I have today, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending our briefing on sequestration, how the 2013 budget cuts may impact you and the agency. And I think we do we have a question? Okay. Let me go ahead and take that question. See if I can read this here. Okay. Can the TSP loans be requested at any point during the furlough period? I think what we said was that TSP loans cannot be requested while on furlough. However, because of the fact that we have the discontinuous or rolling furloughs for most agencies, it won't be that challenging because once I am back at work the next day, possibly, when I am at work, I can request a TSP loan. But while on furlough, I can't. So particularly if I was on furlough for a number of days or a period of time, I would not be able to request a furlough. That is, does that include all days of the furlough period? I think we answered that. Is that correct? Okay, I hope so. Any other questions that we have here from our studio audience or any other questions that have come in? If not, again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is George Ray. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you about sequestration and furloughs, and I wish all of you the best in your careers in federal service. Thanks very much today.